The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Rosie's diner as Maria Rodriguez tied her apron strings behind her waist. At 23, she had been working at the small family restaurant for 2 years, saving every penny she could for nursing school. Her dream was to become a pediatric nurse, but for now, she was grateful for the steady income that helped support her younger brother's college tuition. Maria had always been proud of her heritage. Her grandparents had immigrated from Mexico with nothing but hope and determination, building a life through hard work and sacrifice. She spoke both English and Spanish fluently, often switching between languages when helping the diverse customers who frequented the diner. Her warm smile and genuine care for people made her one of the most popular waitresses at Rosie's. The diner itself was a local institution, known for its hearty breakfasts and friendly atmosphere. The walls were decorated with old photographs of the town's history, and the red vinyl booths had hosted countless conversations over steaming cups of coffee. Regular customers knew they could count on good food and better service, especially when Maria was working. That Tuesday morning started like any other. The breakfast rush was winding down, and Maria was refilling coffee cups and clearing tables when she noticed 2 women enter the restaurant. They appeared to be in their 50s, well-dressed in expensive clothes and carrying designer handbags. However, there was something about their demeanor that immediately put Maria on edge. They looked around the diner with expressions of disdain, as if they had walked into the wrong place entirely. The women chose a corner booth and sat down heavily, their faces showing clear annoyance. Maria approached them with her usual friendly smile, notepad in hand. She had learned over the years that kindness could often transform even the grumpiest customers into pleasant people. Little did she know that this encounter would test every ounce of patience and dignity she possessed. As she walked toward their table, Maria could hear them whispering to each other, occasionally glancing in her direction. Their body language suggested they were already unhappy about something, though she couldn't imagine what. The diner was clean, the morning crowd had been pleasant, and the coffee was fresh. She took a deep breath and prepared to give them the same excellent service she provided to every customer. The taller woman, who had short blonde hair and wore a pearl necklace, looked up at Maria with cold eyes. Her companion, a redhead with too much makeup, continued to whisper something under her breath. Maria noticed their expensive watches and perfectly manicured nails, signs that they came from a different world than most of the diner's usual patrons. Maria reached their table and smiled warmly. She had no idea that this moment would become a turning point in her life, one that would reveal both the worst and best of human nature. The encounter she was about to have would not only challenge her personally, but would also unite an entire community in ways she never could have imagined. The simple act of taking an order was about to become something much more significant. Maria stood beside their table with her pen ready, maintaining her professional smile despite the uncomfortable tension she could feel radiating from the 2 women. She had dealt with difficult customers before, but something about these 2 felt different. Their stares were cold and calculating, as if they were looking for a reason to cause trouble. The blonde woman was the first to speak, her voice sharp and demanding. She complained loudly about the cleanliness of the table, even though Maria had just wiped it down moments before. She ran her finger along the surface, making exaggerated faces of disgust, and declared that everything was dirty. Her companion nodded in agreement, adding comments about how standards had really fallen at places like this. Maria remained calm and polite, apologizing and offering to clean the table again. She fetched fresh cleaning supplies and thoroughly wiped down every inch of the surface, along with the salt and pepper shakers, the sugar dispenser, and even the condiment bottles. The women watched her every move with suspicious eyes, whispering to each other in voices just loud enough for Maria to hear fragments of their complaints. When Maria finished cleaning and asked again for their order, the redhead woman suddenly demanded to see the manager. She claimed that she didn't feel comfortable being served by someone who didn't speak proper English. Maria was shocked by this accusation, since she had been speaking perfect English the entire time. She explained politely that she was fluent in both English and Spanish, but the woman interrupted her rudely. The blonde woman joined in, making increasingly offensive comments about Maria's appearance and background. She questioned whether Maria was in the country legally, demanded to know where she was really from, and suggested that people like her were taking jobs away from real Americans. The words stung deeply, but Maria maintained her composure, knowing that losing her temper would only make the situation worse. Other customers in the diner began to notice the commotion. An elderly man reading his newspaper looked up with concern, while a young mother with her toddler stopped mid-conversation to listen. The atmosphere in the usually cheerful restaurant grew tense as the women's voices became louder and more aggressive. Maria could feel the eyes of everyone in the restaurant on her, waiting to see how she would respond. The situation escalated when the redhead woman stood up and began pointing her finger at Maria, raising her voice so everyone could hear. She declared that she refused to be served by someone who probably couldn't even understand her order properly. She demanded that a white waitress take care of their table instead, using language that made several customers gasp in shock. Maria felt her face flush with embarrassment and anger, but years of working in customer service had taught her the importance of staying professional. She knew that responding with anger would only give these women more ammunition to use against her. Instead, she took a deep breath and made a decision that would surprise everyone in that diner, including herself. Rather than walk away or call for the manager, Maria did something completely unexpected. She pulled out the chair across from the two women and sat down at their table. The restaurant fell completely silent as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Even the women stopped talking, shocked by this bold move from the young waitress they had been trying to intimidate. The silence in the diner was so complete that the only sound was the gentle hum of the coffee machine behind the counter. Maria sat calmly in the chair she had pulled up to the women's table, her hands folded peacefully in her lap. Her heart was beating fast, but her voice was steady and clear when she finally spoke. Maria began by thanking the women for coming to the restaurant. She explained that she wanted to share something with them, hoping they might understand her perspective. The two women looked stunned, clearly not expecting this response to their harsh treatment. They had been prepared for anger, for tears, or for Maria to simply walk away defeated. Instead, they found themselves face to face with a young woman who radiated quiet confidence and dignity. Maria told them about her family's story. She spoke about her grandparents who had arrived in America with empty pockets but full hearts, seeking nothing more than the opportunity to work hard and build a better life for their children. She described how her grandfather had worked 3 jobs to support his family, how her grandmother had cleaned houses during the day and took in sewing at night to make ends meet. She shared how her parents had continued this legacy of hard work, with her father working construction and her mother cleaning offices in the early morning hours before coming home to care for her children. Maria explained that she was the first in her family to graduate high school, and that every dollar she earned at the diner was being saved for nursing school because she wanted to dedicate her life to helping sick children get better. The blonde woman tried to interrupt with another harsh comment, but Maria gently raised her hand and continued speaking. She told them about the English classes her entire family had taken together in the evenings, gathered around their small kitchen table, practicing pronunciation and helping each other with grammar. She mentioned how proud she was to be bilingual, as it allowed her to help customers who spoke Spanish feel welcome and comfortable in the restaurant. Maria explained that she loved her job at the diner because it gave her the chance to brighten people's day. She talked about the regular customers she had gotten to know over the years, like Mr. Johnson, who came in every morning after his wife passed away because he didn't want to eat breakfast alone, or Mrs. Chen, who practiced her English with Maria while enjoying her weekly slice of apple pie. As Maria spoke, her voice never wavered, and her eyes never showed anger or hatred. Instead, she looked directly at the two women with compassion and understanding. She acknowledged that everyone had bad days and that sometimes people said things they didn't really mean when they were frustrated or upset about other things in their lives. The redhead woman's face began to soften slightly as she listened to Maria's words. Several other customers had moved closer to hear what was happening, and one elderly woman had tears in her eyes. The young mother with the toddler was recording the conversation on her phone, sensing that she was witnessing something remarkable. Maria concluded her story by saying that she hoped the women would give her a chance to provide them with the same excellent service she gave to all her customers. She stood up from the chair and asked once more if they were ready to place their order. The transformation in the atmosphere was remarkable. What had started as an ugly confrontation had become something entirely different, and everyone in the restaurant could feel the shift. The two women sat in stunned silence for several long moments after Maria finished speaking. The redhead woman looked down at her hands, clearly uncomfortable with the situation that had unfolded. The blonde woman's expression had changed from one of anger to something that looked almost like shame. Neither of them seemed to know how to respond to Maria's graceful and dignified words. Finally, the redhead woman cleared her throat and quietly asked for a cup of coffee. Her voice was much softer now, lacking the harsh edge it had carried just minutes before. The blonde woman nodded and mumbled that she would like the same. Maria smiled genuinely and told them she would be right back with their coffee and menus, so they could take their time deciding what they wanted to eat. As Maria walked toward the coffee station, the entire restaurant remained unusually quiet. Customers watched her with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. The elderly man who had been reading his newspaper folded it up and approached her at the counter. He told Maria that he had never seen anyone handle such a difficult situation with so much grace and maturity. He wanted to pay for whatever the two women ordered, saying that kindness like hers deserved to be recognized. Word of what happened began to spread quickly through the small restaurant. The young mother who had been recording showed the video to other customers, and soon people were quietly discussing Maria's remarkable response to the women's racist behavior. Several customers approached her throughout the morning to express their support and admiration for how she had handled the situation. When Maria returned to the table with coffee and menus, she found the two women speaking in whispers to each other. They looked up when she approached, and for the first time that morning they made eye contact with her in a way that seemed almost respectful. The blonde woman accepted her coffee with a quiet thank you, while the redhead woman actually managed a small, embarrassed smile. The women ordered their breakfast without any additional complaints or demands. Maria served them efficiently and professionally, checking on them periodically to make sure they had everything they needed. The hostile atmosphere that had filled their corner of the restaurant earlier had completely disappeared, replaced by something that felt almost peaceful. About halfway through their meal, the redhead woman called Maria over to their table. She spoke quietly, clearly embarrassed by her earlier behavior. She apologized for the things she had said and explained that she had been having a terrible week with problems at work and issues with her teenage son. She admitted that she had taken her frustrations out on Maria unfairly, and that there was no excuse for her behavior. The blonde woman was slower to come around, but eventually she too offered a grudging apology. She claimed that she wasn't usually like this and that she had been influenced by her friend's bad mood. While her apology seemed less sincere than her companion's, it was clear that Maria's response had affected both women in ways they hadn't expected. Maria accepted their apologies graciously, telling them that she understood everyone had difficult days and that she held no hard feelings toward either of them. She encouraged them to enjoy the rest of their breakfast and assured them that they were welcome back at the diner any time. Her forgiveness seemed to surprise the women even more than her initial response to their hostility had. By the time the women finished their meal and prepared to leave, the entire dynamic had shifted completely. What had started as an ugly encounter filled with prejudice and hatred had been transformed by Maria's wisdom and compassion into something that looked almost like reconciliation. As the two women gathered their purses and prepared to leave the diner, something unexpected happened. The blonde woman, who had been the more aggressive of the two, reached into her wallet and pulled out a $50 bill. She placed it on the table next to their $22 check, telling Maria to keep the change. Her voice was quiet and her eyes couldn't quite meet Maria's when she said it was the least she could do. The young mother who had been recording the encounter approached the women as they headed toward the door. She had been so moved by what she witnessed that she felt compelled to speak. She introduced herself as Sarah, a local teacher, and told the women that she had recorded Maria's response because she thought it was one of the most powerful examples of grace under pressure she had ever seen. Sarah explained that she planned to share the video with her students as an example of how to respond to bullying and prejudice with dignity rather than anger. She asked the women if they would be willing to share their perspective on what had happened, hoping that their experience might help others learn from the situation as well. The redhead woman, whose name was Linda, surprised everyone by agreeing to speak. She said that she was deeply ashamed of her behavior and that Maria's response had made her realize how her words could hurt another person. She admitted that she had never really thought about how her prejudices affected others until she was confronted with Maria's humanity and grace. Linda explained that watching Maria maintain her dignity while sharing her family's story had been a wake-up call. She realized that she had been carrying around assumptions and biases without ever questioning where they came from or whether they were fair. She said that Maria had taught her more about character in 10 minutes than she had learned in years. The blonde woman, Patricia, was more reluctant to speak publicly about the encounter. However, she did pull Sarah aside and admit that she was embarrassed by how she had acted. She said that Maria's response had made her feel small and petty, and that she would think twice before making judgments about people based on their appearance or background in the future. Meanwhile, other customers in the diner had been watching these exchanges with great interest. Several of them approached Maria to express their admiration for how she had handled the situation. An older couple, who had been regular customers for years, told her that they had always appreciated her service, but now they respected her as a person even more. The elderly man who had offered to pay for the women's meal earlier made good on his promise, despite their generous tip. He told Maria that he wanted to contribute to her nursing school fund because anyone with her compassion and strength would make an excellent nurse. His gesture inspired other customers to offer their support as well. By the end of her shift that day, Maria had received not only words of encouragement, but also several donations toward her education from customers who had been touched by what they witnessed. The diner's owner, Mrs. Rosie, had heard about the incident from multiple customers and made a point to tell Maria how proud she was of her employees' professionalism and character. Word about the encounter began to spread beyond the diner as well. Sarah, the teacher who had recorded the incident, shared the video on social media with Maria's permission. She wrote a detailed post about what she had witnessed, emphasizing Maria's remarkable response and the positive outcome that resulted from choosing compassion over conflict. The video began to attract attention from people throughout the community and beyond. Viewers were struck not only by Maria's grace under pressure, but also by the fact that her approach had actually succeeded in changing the hearts and minds of the women who had attacked her. It was a powerful example of how responding to hatred with love could create real transformation. Within a week, the video of Maria's response had been viewed thousands of times and shared across multiple social media platforms. News outlets picked up the story, and soon Maria found herself being contacted by reporters who wanted to interview her about the incident. She was initially hesitant to speak to the media, preferring to keep the focus on the positive message rather than on herself personally. However, Maria eventually agreed to a few interviews because she realized that her story could help other people who faced similar situations. She appeared on local television and spoke about the importance of responding to prejudice with education rather than anger. She emphasized that while the women's words had hurt her deeply, she chose to see them as people who simply needed to understand her perspective better. The community response to Maria's story was overwhelming. A local church started a scholarship fund in her name to help other young people from immigrant families pursue higher education. The nursing school she hoped to attend offered her a partial scholarship after learning about her character and determination. Local businesses began reaching out to offer her part-time work that would be more flexible with her school schedule. Most surprisingly, Linda, the redhead woman from the diner, reached out to Maria directly. She asked if they could meet for coffee, so she could apologize again in person and share how the encounter had changed her thinking. Linda explained that she had been volunteering at a local literacy center, helping immigrants learn English, because she wanted to do something positive to make up for her past behavior. Linda had also spoken to her teenage son about what had happened, using it as a teaching moment about the importance of treating all people with respect. She told Maria that her son had been so impressed by the story that he had written an essay about it for his social studies class, focusing on how one person's courage could inspire others to be better. Patricia, the blonde woman, had been less public about her change of heart, but she too had made some changes in her life. She had started donating regularly to organizations that helped immigrant families and she had made an effort to examine her own biases and assumptions about people from different backgrounds. The impact of Maria's response extended far beyond the two women she had directly affected. Teachers began using the video in their classrooms to discuss conflict resolution and the power of empathy. Community leaders invited Maria to speak at events about diversity and inclusion. Her story became a symbol of how individual actions could create positive change in the world. Maria continued working at the diner while preparing for nursing school, but now she served customers who often recognized her from the news coverage. Many people came specifically to meet her and to thank her for the example she had set. She always remained humble about the attention, insisting that she had simply done what felt right in the moment. The diner itself became something of a destination for people who wanted to experience the place where such a powerful moment had occurred. Mrs. Rosie eventually had to put up a small plaque commemorating the incident, though Maria was embarrassed by the recognition. The restaurant saw an increase in business from people who wanted to support the establishment where such kindness had been demonstrated. Years later, after Maria had completed her nursing degree and was working in the pediatric ward of the local hospital, she often reflected on that morning at the diner. She realized that the encounter had changed not only the two women who had confronted her, but also herself. It had shown her the power she had to influence others through her words and actions, and it had reinforced her belief in the fundamental goodness of people. The incident had taught an entire community that responding to hatred with love, to ignorance with education, and to prejudice with patience could create real and lasting change. Maria's story became a reminder that ordinary people could do extraordinary things simply by choosing compassion over conflict, and that sometimes the most powerful response to hatred was simply to remain human.